"I need the keys to the Malibu house," Jacob said, like he was asking for the salt. No greeting. No. "I got married, Mom." No photo, no heads up, no invitation, just the demand. "You got married?" I asked, even though I shouldn't have needed to ask. My heart already knew the truth. "Yeah, last week. We didn't want to make it a big thing. Just family." Just family. The word struck like a slap. I was still holding the phone to my ear, but everything inside me went mute, like someone had pulled the plug on my senses. The kitchen, always warm from the old farmhouse oven, felt suddenly cold, distant. "Jacob," I said slowly, "am I not your family?" His pause was long, too long. "It's not like that, Mom. We just wanted to keep it small. Besides," Jessica thought, "it would be easier this way." There it was. Jessica. His new wife. The woman I'd never met, never even heard of until now. The woman whose hand he'd kissed, probably, after they hung up on me last month for interrupting dinner. The woman he was now giving my house to. No, not giving, demanding. "You're asking for the keys," I said, voice flat, "to the house your father and I built with our bare hands. The house we sweated in, the house I raised you in. It's just sitting there, Mom. We want to use it for our honeymoon, maybe stay for a while. I figured you'd want to help us start our life together." I placed the receiver back on its cradle, slowly, quietly. He didn't even notice I was no longer on the line. The rage that followed wasn't loud. It wasn't a scream or a sob, it was still, sharp, focused, a hurricane behind glass. He had taken me for granted before, canceled birthdays, skipped Christmas, showed up late to my husband's funeral wearing sunglasses indoors. But this was different. This was war, not a loud one. I wasn't going to throw things or beg to be included. That was never my way. No, my revenge would be clean, precise, ice over fire. Let them underestimate me. They all had, all their lives, a quiet woman, a mother, a woman who listened more than she spoke, who cooked more than she questioned. They'd forgotten that I was the one who kept the books, who signed the deeds, who held the power of attorney when my husband died. Jacob forgot that the reason he could afford grad school was because I sold the last good acre we had. He thought he could erase me, replace me with a stranger, and claim my legacy like a wedding favor. He was wrong. I stood up and walked to the sink. I dumped the cold tea. The water spiraled down the drain, bitter and final. He thinks I'm old. That I won't fight. That I'll hand over the keys like a good little mother. But I remember who I was before I was ever someone's wife, someone's mother. And this time, he'll remember too. 3 days later, I was in Malibu, parked across from the house my son believed would be his fresh start, his second marriage, his second chance, and his second attempt to make me disappear. The car's engine ticked quietly as it cooled, the only sound beneath the slow hiss of the ocean wind. The house stood there, smug in the sun, its white trim and glass doors gleaming like it knew something. I rested my hand on the passenger seat, where the small gift box sat, tied with a flawless ivory ribbon. It looked innocent, almost sweet, but it was hollow, empty inside, just like the gesture it mocked. I didn't need him to love me anymore. I needed him to remember who I was. The gravel crunched under my shoes as I stepped out, the box tucked neatly beneath my arm like a peace offering. The front steps still creaked the way they used to when my husband and I built them with calloused hands and borrowed time. I placed the box gently on the welcome mat, as if it belonged. The ribbon fluttered slightly in the breeze. I didn't linger. Back in the car, I sat for a moment, hands tight on the steering wheel, watching the soft hum of wealth and emptiness settle into place. My fingers itched to call him, to scream, to cry, to demand to know why he thought I was a vault he could ransack one last time before locking the door forever. But I didn't call. I never begged. Instead, I drove. Past the bakery where he once ran barefoot for Sunday cinnamon rolls. past the spot where his first wife cried in my arms after he'd disappeared for 2 nights in Vegas, past the memories he'd filed away and left to rot. He hadn't told me about the wedding because he didn't want me there. I understood that now. This wasn't about forgetting, this was erasure. He wanted the house because it was valuable, but he wanted it without the roots, without the stories, without me. He wanted to build something new on top of the bones I laid with love and loss. And if he thought I would just hand it over, he was still the boy who thought I didn't notice when he stole money from my purse. The box didn't hold anything of value. That was the point. A perfect shell, gleaming on the outside, hollow at the core, just like their marriage, just like his conscience. Let her open it, expecting diamonds or deeds. Let her find nothing. Let that silence speak louder than any scream. It wasn't about revenge. Not really. Not yet. It was about reminding them that I existed, that I was watching, that I could play their game with sharper teeth and better manners. I reached the edge of town before the first vibration buzzed through the car. My phone lit up like a wounded animal. Jacob. Then again. Then her. Voicemail. Messages. Screaming text bubbles. Angry little flares of entitlement and disbelief. I didn't answer. Let them wonder. Let them turn on each other, grasping at the edges of a gift that meant nothing but meant everything. I drove until the sky turned dusky and soft, the headlights casting long shadows on the road behind me. I was done with being their mother, if that meant being their doormat. Let them come undone. Let the unraveling begin. That evening, back in the living room of the family farmhouse, my phone shrieked into the stillness like a wounded animal. I didn't answer right away. I watched it vibrate across the table, the caller ID flashing Jessica's name, her name, not his. That told me everything I needed to know. He didn't have the spine, not yet. When I finally picked it up, her voice hit me like shattered glass, sharp, high-pitched, and furious. "What did you do?" she screamed, as though she had been wronged. I could hear her pacing, the sound of heels clicking on hardwood. "You think this is funny? Is this some kind of twisted joke?" I didn't flinch. I held the receiver to my ear like it was something delicate, something already dying. Her words tumbled out in a rush, ugly and panicked, her voice splintering beneath the weight of her own humiliation. Somewhere in the background, I thought I heard Jacob say something, low and muffled, but she talked right over him. Of course she did. I let her scream until her voice cracked and the silence clawed its way back in. Then I spoke. "I simply gave you what you deserved." My voice came out colder than I expected. Not angry, not cruel, just still, just true. And then I hung up. The click of the receiver returning to its cradle was more satisfying than it should have been. It felt like the slam of a courtroom gavel, the thud of finality. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, not from regret, but from the adrenaline that still coursed through me like fire under skin. I stood there in the middle of the room, listening to the silence fill the corners like mist. No one else was in this house. No one had been for a long time. And yet, for a moment, I could feel all the ghosts rising. My late husband's disapproving stare, my mother's tight-lipped judgment, the little boy Jacob used to be, all wide eyes and scraped knees. Where had he gone? He had let her call me. He had watched her unravel and said nothing. I walked to the window and stared out at the darkened yard, the silhouette of the old barn cutting a jagged shape against the sky. The night was quiet but not peaceful. Charged, like the air before a storm. Let her rage. Let her scream herself hoarse. She thought she was marrying into a legacy she could control, one she could manipulate. She thought she'd gotten an old woman too tired to fight back. She'd made the same mistake Jacob had. I wrapped my shawl tighter around my shoulders and sank into the armchair by the window. The bitterness in my chest wasn't sharp anymore. It had settled, heavy and thick, like molasses left too long on the stove. But underneath it, a pulse of satisfaction beat steady. She had taken the bait, and Jacob, my son, had let her. The house was quiet again, but the silence didn't comfort me this time. It thrilled me. 2 days later, I was back in my home office, surrounded by stacks of brittle folders and old county records, the storm in Jessica's voice still echoing faintly in the corners of my mind. I had heard enough, felt enough. Their reactions had confirmed what I already knew. There was more to this woman than polished charm and expensive perfume. I didn't just want her out. I wanted her exposed. My fingers, stiff from years of arthritis and frostbitten winters, curled around the computer mouse with a quiet determination. The screen glowed in the dim afternoon light. I pulled up the first public records database, the familiar interface like an old adversary I knew how to wound. My tea went cold beside me again, untouched. I wasn't looking for gossip. I was looking for leverage. Something real, something that couldn't be denied or spun into more of their slippery half-truths. I started with the basics: her maiden name, birth certificate, educational records. Clean enough. Too clean. So I went deeper. Marriage records. The moment the first one appeared, I felt the chill rise up my arms. Another name. Another date. Another man. Then, another. And another. Each one followed by divorce filings. Tidy, quiet proceedings. The kind that slipped through the cracks unless someone like me went digging. She'd been married before. Not once. Not twice. Multiple times. Every few years, a new name attached to hers. Every time she walked away with something, property, money, settlement sealed behind redacted pages. I stared at the screen, the cold light flickering across my face. The pattern was clear. She was a predator. And Jacob was just the next fool in line. But this time she had walked into a house that didn't belong to him. This time, the name on the deed was mine. And unlike the men before, I wasn't blinded by her smile or lured by her softness. I wasn't a man at all. I was a mother scorned. I opened another tab, pulling up social media accounts, usernames buried under makeup brands and lifestyle hashtags. I tracked photos through face recognition tools, found old posts, saw her tagged at functions with unfamiliar men. One caught my eye, a blurry photo at a private country club, her hand on the arm of a man 20 years older, a Rolex glinting on his wrist. Comments deleted, likes hidden. I took a screenshot anyway. I kept going until my eyes burned and my fingers ached, until a pile of printed records grew beside me like a fortress. She'd made a mistake coming for me. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking beneath my weight, and stared at the wall where my late husband's diploma still hung. He had taught me how to read people, how to listen when they weren't speaking, how to look a snake in the eye without blinking. Jessica wasn't clever. She was sloppy. And Jacob, my son, my own flesh and blood, had handed her the keys without hesitation. Again. It wasn't his first mistake with a woman, but this time, it wouldn't be just his heart she broke. It would be our name, our legacy. Not while I was breathing. I picked up the stack of printouts and slipped them into a manila folder. I didn't just have a suspicion now. I had evidence. And she wouldn't see me coming. The next morning, I drove into town and parked in front of a quiet little coffee shop, the manila folder sealed and heavy in my handbag like a loaded weapon. Kevin was already waiting, seated in the far corner beneath a crooked painting of some long-forgotten coastline. He looked older than I remembered, grayer at the temples, thinner in the shoulders, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. We didn't bother with pleasantries. The moment I slid into the booth across from him, I pulled the folder from my bag and laid it on the table like a transaction. "I need you to look into this," I said. His fingers brushed the paper briefly before opening it. The overhead light caught the creases in his brow as he flipped through the documents. Marriage records, court filings, low-resolution screenshots from long-buried accounts. His expression never changed. "You think she's working a pattern?" he asked finally. "I don't think, Kevin." "I know." His lips pressed into a thin line. "How long have they been married?" Not long enough for him to see what she is, but long enough for her to start planning. He didn't ask what I meant. He knew. Kevin always understood the things I didn't say. He closed the folder gently, like he was tucking a child in for the night, then leaned back in his chair. "What are you hoping to find?" "Something that will bury her," I said flatly. I want dates, names, financials. I want to know who else she's bled dry. And if she's got anything hidden, money, property, another man, I want it in writing." He nodded once, slow and deliberate. "You don't want your son to know?" I met his gaze without flinching. "He's not ready, and if I go to him now, she'll twist it. He'll defend her." Kevin tapped a finger on the folder. "You still trust me?" "If I didn't, I wouldn't be here." We didn't need to say more. I paid for our coffees even though neither of us had touched them. As I stood, Kevin tucked the folder under his arm and rose too, his posture still soldier straight despite retirement. "I'll be in touch soon," he said. I didn't thank him. There was no need. I walked out into the cool morning light with a calm heart and steady hands. It felt good to move with purpose again, to be the one pulling the strings instead of being yanked by them. Back in the car, I sat for a moment, watching the people pass along the sidewalk, young mothers with strollers, an elderly couple arguing softly over directions. Life went on, blissfully unaware of the quiet war. One was waging behind the scenes. They had drawn first blood. Jacob with his cowardice, Jessica with her greed. But I had the advantage now. Patience, experience, and an iron spine that neither of them counted on. Let them smile and scheme in their Malibu nest. Let them play house with their illusions. Because I had just placed the first stone in the foundation of their undoing, and I would not stop until I razed every lie they'd built. 5 days later, I was back in my home office, the curtains drawn against the August glare, when Kevin called. His voice came low, controlled, no frills, no pleasantries. "You were right," he said. "She's been married 3 times, walked away with settlements every single time, and that's just what I found in the public records." I didn't speak. I didn't need to. My grip on the phone tightened as I listened, absorbing every word like a soldier memorizing a battle map. "She's got a separate bank account in her maiden name," he continued. "She's been funneling money into it since the week after the wedding. Mostly small transfers, nothing flashy, but they add up." I stared across the room at the photograph above the fireplace, the one of Jacob as a boy holding a fishing rod, smiling with the earnestness only children have. That boy was long gone, replaced by a man too blind or too proud to see the woman bleeding him dry from the inside out. Kevin cleared his throat, shifting tones. "There's more. She was sued in another state. Fraud. Settled out of court. Quiet. Expunged from most databases. But I know where to look." "Send it all," I said. "I'll have it delivered by noon. Certified. Clean copies." I hung up without saying goodbye. I didn't need to. Kevin had done his part, and now it was my move. I crossed to the desk, opened the drawer with the key I kept pinned inside my bra strap, and removed the leather folder with the family trust documents. The originals. I placed them flat on the desk, smoothing the pages with deliberate hands. I read every line again, even though I'd memorized them years ago. The inheritance, the clauses, the contingencies, the safeguards I'd put in place long before Jacob ever brought that woman into my life. He thought I was just the aging mother, out on the pasture with my tea and my memories, but I had always known this day would come. The day he would try to circumvent the foundation his father and I built. The day he would betray me with a smile and a pen. Now I had proof, not suspicions, not instincts. Evidence, documented, indisputable. I slid Kevin's folder beside the trust, the weight of it heavier than any weapon I'd ever held. Divorce records, depositions, financial statements, and photographs. Those always left the deepest cuts. She'd changed her hair in each life, but her eyes never changed. Cold, calculating, always looking just beyond the man beside her, as if already measuring what she could take before she left. And Jacob had handed her the keys to the kingdom. Fool. I snapped the folders shut, fastened the clasp, and stood. There would be no confrontation today, no screaming matches or slammed doors. That wasn't how I worked. But the hourglass had tipped. That evening, back in the farmhouse kitchen, I stirred a pot of rice with one hand while the other hovered near the phone, the deed to the Malibu house folded neatly beside it like a knife under linen. The smell of garlic and rosemary filled the room. Simple comforts. Distractions, really. I wasn't hungry. But habits have their place, even in war. I spooned the chicken into a shallow bowl, set it on the table untouched, and reached for the phone. It rang once before Jacob picked up. "Mom?" His voice was cautious, young, almost hopeful. I softened mine, carefully. "I've been thinking," I said, low and measured, "about what you said, about the house." He didn't speak, not at first. I could hear him breathing, slow and shallow, the kind of silence that comes when someone senses they're about to win. "I want you to have it," I continued. I overreacted. I suppose I wasn't ready to let go, but I see now that it's time. Another pause. Then, really. I smiled into the receiver, a tight little thing he couldn't see. "Yes, sweetheart, you and Jessica deserve a fresh start. If this house helps, then take it. It's yours." I could hear something shift on the other end, the faint rustle of fabric. A whisper. Jessica was there. I didn't need to hear her clearly. I knew that tone, the hush of someone pressing their advantage. Jacob's voice dropped, almost sheepish. "That means a lot, Mom. Really, thank you." "I'll have the key delivered tomorrow," I said, still gentle. "I want this to be a new beginning, for all of us." He promised to call again soon. I hung up first. The line went dead, and I sat in the quiet, the lie still fresh in my mouth. It didn't taste like poison. It tasted like clarity. He didn't ask why I changed my mind. He didn't question the timing or the sudden reversal. He wanted to believe the fantasy too badly. And Jessica, she didn't need to be convinced. She only needed to be given the illusion of winning. I imagined her in that moment, perched beside him, hands folded sweetly in her lap, hiding the triumph behind her smile. She thought I had finally broken, that I had surrendered, that I had chosen peace over pride. Good, let her think the war was over. The bait was set, the trap was laid. Now I would wait, not passively, but precisely. A predator with patience, a mother with a ledger, and soon the reckoning would begin. 1 week later, I sat in the living room, the early evening shadows stretching long across the floor, and for the first time in days, I allowed the silence to settle in fully. I hadn't heard from Jacob since I sent the key. Not a word, not a check-in, not even a polite thank you. Just that one, clipped text message, "Thank you, Mom." No punctuation, no warmth. It was the kind of message that should have made my stomach churn. Instead, I found myself staring at the phone, waiting for something more. But nothing came. Maybe if I'd fought for him differently. Maybe if I hadn't let the first wife leave without saying my piece. Maybe if I'd been less proud. But pride was all I'd had left, wasn't it? I wasn't made for pretending everything was fine. That woman in Malibu, she was. Jessica wore charm like a tailored suit. But charm doesn't hold up under pressure. And now, with the key in their hands, pressure was exactly what I'd given them. I knew what she was doing, even from here. Measuring curtains, talking loudly about renovations she hadn't earned, opening drawers like they were already hers. And Jacob, sitting beside her, nodding along, trying to believe it was love and not strategy. But something had shifted. Jessica had gotten comfortable too quickly. And Jacob had always noticed the small things, even if he didn't say them aloud. I knew he would hear her words now, how she spoke about the furniture like it was outdated, about selling the heirloom pieces for a fresher aesthetic. I could practically hear her saying it, pretending she was helping him modernize, when really she was pawning off our family history one piece at a time. It was just a matter of time before he saw her clearly, and when he did, it would break something in him. I returned the photo to the drawer and closed it gently. My hands didn't shake anymore. Let the guilt come, let the sadness hover, but they would pass. They always did. Because beneath all of it, grief, doubt, loneliness, I knew what I was doing. And I knew why. Jessica was showing her teeth, and Jacob had finally started to notice the bite. The next morning, I was in the kitchen, the sun barely cutting through the overcast sky, when the phone rang. And this time, it wasn't Jacob. "Grandma?" The voice was soft, hesitant. "Tyler." My chest tightened, one hand gripping the edge of the counter, while the other held the receiver to my ear. "Tyler? What's wrong?" There was a long pause, the kind only a child makes when they're trying to be brave. I need to talk to you about Dad." His whisper dropped even lower. "About Jessica." The floor seemed to tilt under me. I pulled out a chair and sat, my body tense, my mind already racing. What about them? He hesitated again. Then, like a dam cracking, the words tumbled out. "There's this guy Dad used to work with. He told me something weird. He said Jessica's been married before, that she's done stuff to other families, that she got a bunch of money and left. He said people think she only married Dad because of the inheritance." I closed my eyes, pressing my fingers to my temple. The weight of it all crashed down in that moment. Not because I was surprised, but because he knew. Because a boy, my grandson, had been forced to peek behind the curtain and see the rot growing beneath the surface. "How much do you know?" I asked gently. "I don't know everything, just what I overheard, and—" His voice cracked. "She's been weird. She said I should start calling her Mom now, and that I should forget about the past. She said she'd take care of me and Dad from now on, but the way she said it, Grandma, it didn't feel right." "No, of course it didn't." My grip on the phone tightened. "Tyler, listen to me. You are not imagining things. You're not wrong. But I need you to stay quiet. Don't talk to your father about this yet, and don't confront her. Not until I say. Can you do that for me?" He sniffled, but I could tell he was trying to be strong. "Yeah, I don't want anything bad to happen." "It won't. Not to you. I promise. I won't let it." When the call ended, I didn't move right away. My hand stayed frozen on the receiver. My coffee had gone cold, untouched beside me, and the scent of burnt toast lingered in the air like a joke I couldn't laugh at. This was no longer about me. This wasn't about what Jacob had done or what Jessica was trying to steal. Tyler was in the middle of it now. He had trusted me. Reached out with shaking fingers through the fog his parents had built around him. He was smart. He had eyes. And now Jessica would see him as a threat, just like she saw me. She was already working on him, twisting the words, remolding the narrative. But not on my watch. The guilt that had hovered in the corners of my mind these past weeks burned away like mist in sunlight. There was no space for it now. No space for softness. Jessica had set her sights on controlling the house, the money, and now the boy. But Tyler was mine. My grandson. My blood. My legacy. And if she wanted a war, I would bring her one. I knew what I had to do next. I had to expose her and protect him, whatever it cost me. 3 days later, I stood in the lawyer's office, the manila folder from Kevin clutched tight in my hands, the edges worn from too many times being opened and studied like a war map. The building smelled of dust and old paper, sterile, gray, impersonal. But this wasn't a place for grief or second guessing. This was where battles changed hands. This was where war turned legal. Michael greeted me with his usual calm nod, his wire-rimmed glasses sliding slightly down his nose. "Come in," he said, his voice warm but wary. I didn't waste time. I sat down, laid the folder flat between us, and looked him in the eye. "I need to move forward," I said. "All of it. I want Jessica exposed." He didn't blink, just opened the folder and began to flip through the documents Kevin had compiled. Marriage records, divorce settlements, hidden accounts, social media evidence. It was all there. Years of her playing the same game, different men, the same ending. But it wasn't just about her anymore. I pulled a second sheet from my bag. A note I'd jotted down the night Tyler called. I slid it across the desk. "My grandson came to me. He's afraid. He knows something's wrong." Michael scanned it, then looked up sharply. "How old is he?" 13. Too young to be dragged into this mess, but smart enough to see it. Michael leaned back, steepling his fingers. "You're ready to make this official?" "I've been ready. But now it's not just about protecting what's mine. It's about protecting what's his. She's already planting herself in his life, telling him to call her Mom, talking about consolidating finances, power of attorney. That got his attention. He turned toward his computer and began typing. That changes things. If she's angling for legal access to Jacob's finances and there's a minor involved, we may be able to pursue an emergency injunction. At the very least, it gives us grounds to freeze movement on your estate. Good, I said. Do it. He nodded, already focused. We'll file for a motion to block any financial authority being transferred. And I'll start collecting everything we can legally pull. Phone records, financial transfers, maybe even private investigator surveillance if you'll allow it. I allow it, I said coldly. I want her cornered. No way out. Michael paused. Are you prepared for the fallout? This will put your son in the middle. He's already there, I said. He just doesn't know it yet. Michael nodded gravely and closed the folder. I'll file the motion by end of day. I stood, smoothing my coat, my heartbeat calm. Steady. Let Jessica keep thinking she was winning. Let her fill her days at the Malibu house with plans and paint samples. Let her pour wine and pretend it was hers. Because the papers she'd never see coming were already in motion. Legal, ruthless, permanent. And when it all crashed down, it wouldn't just be about a house. It would be about her lies, her greed, her reach for a legacy that was never hers to touch. This wasn't revenge anymore. It was justice for me, for Tyler. And I would see it through right to the end. 4 days later, I was back in Michael's office, the sky outside as gray as the mood that settled between us while he reviewed the court clerk's email on his screen. It's done, he said. Emergency restraining order granted this morning. I let out a long breath, controlled, contained, but I felt the tremor behind my ribs. He turned the monitor so I could see the judge's signature. The document froze any transfer of property, froze joint accounts, and, most critically, barred Jessica from filing for or being granted power of attorney over Jacob until further notice. The court had accepted the evidence, her past, her pattern, her intentions. Jessica was legally cornered. She'll be served by this afternoon, Michael added. Subpoena included. Trial date's been set. He said it calmly, but I saw the steel beneath it. I nodded. Good. Let it all begin. I didn't smile. There was no satisfaction in it. Not yet. That would come only when Tyler's future was safe, and when Jacob finally stopped defending the woman tearing our family apart from the inside. Michael stood to walk me out, but just as I reached for the doorknob, his phone buzzed on the desk behind us. He glanced down. It's the courier. She's been served. And with that, it was real. By the time I pulled into the farmhouse driveway an hour later, the leaves were coming down in sharp gusts, wind tugging them from the trees like something impatient and angry. I stepped inside and poured myself a glass of water, my hand steady now in a way it hadn't been in weeks. Jacob called before sundown. I saw his name flash across the screen, and for a heartbeat, I considered letting it go to voicemail. But I didn't. Mom, he said, voice tight, strained, already halfway to broken. What did you do? I said nothing. Let the silence hang. Let him sit in it. He exhaled hard. Jessica got served. Some court order. She's freaking out. Says she's being attacked. She isn't being attacked, I said coolly. She's being revealed. He was quiet. Then, why didn't you tell me sooner? I did, I said, voice like glass. Not in words you wanted, but I told you every way I could. You just weren't ready to listen. Another pause. Then, softer. Tyler told me what she said to him. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. He kept going. I thought I was protecting him by keeping things calm. But I wasn't. I let her in too far. My grip on the phone tightened. I don't even know if she loved me, he said finally. She didn't, I answered. And you knew it, somewhere in you. You always knew. He didn't argue. There was no more denial, no more sidestepping. Only silence. And shame. When's the trial? He asked. 3 weeks. Will you be there? I'll be in the front row, I said, with Tyler. I hung up first. Outside, the wind howled harder, pulling the last gold leaves from the trees and scattering them across the field. Inside, I stood alone, but not uncertain. Not anymore. The next time I walked into a courtroom, it wouldn't be as a grieving mother or a woman trying to protect a house. It would be as a witness. A plaintiff, a woman with evidence, resolve, and blood in her eyes. The trial was coming, and Jessica wouldn't walk away from this one. 3 weeks later, I walked into the courtroom wearing black, not for mourning, but for precision. I didn't want to be underestimated. I wanted them all to remember exactly what kind of woman they were dealing with. The room was cool and still, the kind of silence that settles just before something breaks. Jessica sat across from me at the defendant's table, lips painted too red, eyes flicking around the room like a trapped animal still trying to charm the hunter. Jacob sat beside her but leaned away, jaw clenched. Tyler was with me, just behind, his small hand resting on my shoulder like a quiet anchor. When the judge entered, all the noise drained from the room. It began, as these things always do, with procedure, names, dates, charges. Then came Michael, calm, thorough, and merciless, laying out everything. The restraining order, the frozen accounts, the marriages, the money, the manipulation. He moved through it like a scalpel, peeling back the glossy facade she wore like armor. Then it was her turn. Jessica stood, dramatic, her voice thin and trembling at first. "This is a smear campaign," she said, looking around for sympathy that never came. "She's bitter. She never liked me. She's making all of this up because she's jealous of our marriage." She turned toward the judge, her hands fluttering to her chest. "She's an old woman. She's confused. She doesn't understand how things work anymore. She's angry because Jacob doesn't need her. She's desperate." I didn't move. I didn't blink. Let her dig. "She's delusional," Jessica added, louder now. "None of those marriages ended the way she claims. Those settlements? Coincidence. And I never touched Tyler's inheritance. I didn't even know he had one." The courtroom stirred, whispers, eyes narrowing. Jessica stepped forward again, desperate now. "She's not of sound mind. You shouldn't even be entertaining this." Michael stood. "Your Honor, if I may." He walked to the front, calm as ever, and handed the clerk a stack of documents. Verified bank transfers, property records, legal depositions from Jessica's previous husbands, all 3 of them. He turned to the judge. "And attached, you'll find a transcript from a recorded conversation taken with consent between the defendant and a financial advisor. In it, she discusses assuming power of attorney over Jacob, liquidating their joint assets, and leveraging Tyler's inheritance as part of her long-term strategy." Her words, not ours. Jessica's smile died on her lips. The judge looked over the documents, glasses sliding down his nose as he turned page after page. The room fell into a thick, suffocating hush. Jessica fidgeted. Jacob didn't look at her once. Finally, the judge raised his head. "Miss Caldwell," he said, using her maiden name, her real name. "You are hereby found guilty of financial fraud, misrepresentation, and attempting to unlawfully obtain power of attorney through deceptive means. Given the overwhelming evidence, this court has no hesitation in rendering its verdict." Jessica stood frozen, mouth open. No words came. "You will be barred from contact with the plaintiff and her grandson. Restitution will be calculated and enforced, and your name will be entered into the civil fraud registry pending further investigation by the state." A gasp rippled across the gallery. The bailiff approached. Jessica tried to protest, but her voice cracked under the weight of the moment. Cameras clicked. Phones rose. Public humiliation unfolded as she was escorted out, no longer the predator in heels, but a liar laid bare. I watched her go without a word. Jacob still didn't move. When it was over, I stood. Tyler rose with me. Outside the courthouse, the light was sharp and clean, like the sky had finally cleared. I had done what I came to do. I hadn't just protected my grandson. I had shown them all exactly what a woman becomes when you try to steal from her and fail. Jacob came to me weeks later, eyes red, voice cracking with regret. He apologized, not just for what he'd done, but for what he hadn't seen. I forgave him. Tyler, Jacob, and I moved into the Malibu house together, not as a broken family, but a rebuilt one. And for the first time in years, the ocean outside felt calm, peaceful, ours.